You're the Managing Director of CHOPARD Asia for the last 1.5 years. How do you see Indonesia? How important is it for CHOPARD?
Well, Indonesia is a very important market to us. It's actually very different to many of the other markets that I'm responsible for, in that it has very little sort of inward tourism. So the business that's conducted here is very much local based. That's not to say that it's poor, it's just the fact that is a fact of life. In due course, I think we'll see an increase in tourism, but at the moment it's a very stable market because you're not concerned with the vagaries of tourism. But it's a good market, it's a growth market for us. We've seen in the last few years some big differences in the way that the consumer's reacting, responding to our collection. A few years ago you'd see men's steel watches as the main basis of your collection. Increasingly ladies' diamond watches and all the way through to high jewellery for the top tier consumer in this market, which is very exciting for us. And of course as the market develops and as the middle tier consumer starts to become more affluent, we expect, I think, to see the same sort of trends developing in the market as we've seen in the top tier consumer over the last 3 to 4 years. So some big changes, very exciting position for.
Do you see any different treatment for Asian market, Indonesia specifically, when you have your global branding, which is very international and everyone's aware of CHOPARD, but do the Indonesians appreciate the brand as much as others from other countries?
I believe they do. I mean, the consumer is very aware of luxury goods. There's still a lot of work we have to do in that regard, but the Indonesian consumer is looking for, reputable, quality luxury brands who have a good reputation and a good aura in the marketplace, and that hasn't changed, and that's the same, I think, throughout the whole of the world. But it is to some extent a question of education and acknowledgement by the Indonesian consumer that the brands have different profiles and different characteristics and different ways of presenting themselves, and progressively that will become, I think, clearer to the Indonesian consumer.
Talking about the business, how big is Indonesia's contribution to the growth of the business and the revenue of CHOPARD in Asia?
It's growing, and growing probably faster than many of the other markets. Clearly there are markets like Singapore and Korea and Taiwan that are further developed, and there are bigger markets for us. But in the great scheme of things, Indonesia is growing, it's growing very fast, and I think we see that accelerating through, and with 240 million consumers in the market, the potential in Indonesia is absolutely enormous. And so we see going forward Indonesia as being a very, very important market as far as the Southeast Asia region is concerned.
If you can put Indonesia in terms of rankings, where would Indonesia be?
It depends if you're talking globally or if you're talking
probably
in the Asia Pacific.
For now?
In the Asia Pacific, clearly you've got Singapore and Korea and Taiwan, which is stronger, but I would have to say, and then of course Thailand as well. I would say it comes after Thailand in terms of the amount of business that is important, exactly. But that is of course influenced very much by inward tourism.
Okay, so looking at your global sales, watches still contribute probably 50% of the total sales. And jewelleries and other accessories are starting to pick up from what we observe.
Yes, we've seen that.
But we haven't seen any jewelleries in Indonesia yet. Do you plan to introduce your lines of jewellery and accessories for Indonesia?
It is a fact that in the Asian market, watches are very important, and very much more important than in sort of the European market. And so the watches are probably representing maybe 90% of our turnover. But we have progressively, as women are starting to make their own purchase decisions, who are interested in jewellery, that the jewellery business is actually growing. And because we're very strong in jewellery and our associations with Cannes and the Oscars and the BAFTAs, we're in a good position to take advantage of any shift in the change in the marketplace.
And do you see Indonesia taking over Thailand or Singapore later in the future?
That's an interesting point. I think Singapore will be our hub, and the business that and of course it's only an hour and a half by plane from Jakarta. So Singapore will be the base, but with 240 million
and growing
consumers,
middle
and we've got 6 million in Singapore, who knows?